So what I'm going to go over now is page 5 of the iReady at-home take-home packet. And page 5 deals with applying properties of negative exponents. Now I've already gone over negative exponents in class, but I'll go over the properties of negative exponents again in this video. So we're specifically going to talk about how to change negative exponents into positive exponents, because that's one of the skills you need to be able to do these problems on page 5. So here are the rules for changing something that has a negative exponent into a positive exponent. First, write whatever they give you as a fraction. So we're going to look at something and we're going to change something into a fraction, like this one right here. At the school I'm at, the elementary teachers tell them to put pants on it. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to take whatever it is that has a negative exponent, if it's not already written as a fraction, we're going to change it into a fraction by putting pants on it. Everything can be divided by 1, and it's not going to change what it is. So that's our first step. Our first step, if it's not already written as a fraction, to write it as a fraction. So that's rule number 1. Rule number 1, write it as a fraction. Rule number 2, flip it and change the sign of the exponent. Flip the fraction and change the sign of only the exponent. Let me say that again. Change the sign of only the exponent. So let's do that for our example here. We've got our example. We've got it written as a fraction. What I'm going to do is I'm going to flip this fraction. I'm going to take the numerator, put it as the denominator, put it as the numerator. So a 1 now goes in the top instead of the bottom. There's my base of 2, and I'm going to change the sign of only the exponent, like that. The final rule is to evaluate. Always evaluate what you've got. Now, unless it tells you to leave it as a power, but most of the time we're going to evaluate these things. So, write it as a fraction, flip it, and change the sign of only the exponent, then evaluate it. So let's finish this one that we got started here. We flipped it, we changed the sign, and now I need to take 2 to that power right there. 2 to the second power is 2 times 2. So this ends up being a fraction of 1/4. 2 to the negative second power is simply 1/4. Let's look at this other example right here. This other example, I've got a negative exponent. So the very first thing I'm going to do is I am going to write it as a fraction, since it's not already a fraction. And like I said, at my school they talk about, that's called putting pants on it. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to flip it, put the 1 in the top, put the base of 3, and I'm going to change the sign of the exponent to a positive 3. And then I'm going to evaluate this. 1 over 3 times 3 times 3, 3 times 3 is 9, times 3 is 27. 1/27. So let's look at some other examples of this. Look at this one. This one right here is already written as a fraction. So if they give you something that's already written as a fraction, you don't have to do step number 1 of writing it as a fraction. You go right to step number 2. Step number 2 tells you to flip it. So let's do that. Let's make a fraction. Let's take the 1, now put it in the bottom. Take the base, put it in the top, and every time I flip this, I change signs of exponents. Instead of a -4, it's going to be a +4. I evaluate this. This is going to be 4 times 4 times 4 times 4. 4 times 4 is 16. 4 times 4 is 16. And 16 times 16 is 256. So I write 256 in the top, and I take 256, and according to this, divide it by 1. Remember, if you can't divide these numbers, you have to leave it as a fraction. I can divide these numbers. So 256 divided by 1 is 256. So let's take another one that's already written as a fraction, but make it look a little different, like this one right here. This one already written as a fraction, but I've got a negative exponent. So I don't have to do step number 1. I don't have to write it as a fraction. Everything inside these parentheses is being taken to this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to follow my rules. I'm going to flip it. And anytime I flip a fraction, guess what happens to the exponent? I change the sign of that exponent. It starts off as a -2, changes to a +2. So it doesn't matter if it's on the like this or if it's on the outside of the parentheses. As soon as I flip that fraction, I change the sign of that exponent. I apply that exponent to each one of those numbers. Exponent of 2, 4 to the second power is 4 times 4. 4 times 4 is 16. I apply this exponent to this 3 right here. 3 times 3 is 9. Something that you need to remember, if this fraction in here is simplified, you can take it to whatever power you want to, and this will automatically be simplified. So I don't have to worry about trying to simplify this. Anytime I flip a fraction, I change the sign of the exponent. One other rule that I went over in class that you need to be reminded of about how to do these type of problems is this. Anything raised to the power 0 will always be equal to 1. It doesn't matter what it is. 5 to the 0 power is equal to 1. -10 to the 0 power is equal to 1. Anything I can make up, if it's raised to the 0 power, it will always be equal to 1. X to the 0 power, guess what? Is 1. Anything I can make up, m to the 0 power is 1. Any other number, I can take fractions. 1/4 raised to the 0 power, that's going to be equal to 1. So anything you can think of raised to the 0 power is going to be 1. These are the basic rules we're going to use, and we're going to apply these rules to those problems on page 5.